You ready to finish up the rest of this chapter? We're going to finish most of it today. We'll have one little page to look at tomorrow. So we've talked about so much important information this week, and really I'm just introducing it to you because we'll go back and review it some next week. But, you know, we've talked about after the Revolutionary War, we had to come up with a plan for government for our country. We talked about the Articles of Confederation, how it was a plan to purposely make a weak government so the government couldn't boss us around like King George did. But we saw how the Articles of Confederation were too weak and we couldn't even protect our country from enemies, and we were broke as a country. And so yesterday we got into the lesson about how the Constitutional Convention, these men met and they decided that, to have this private meeting and decide not how they're going to fix the Articles of Confederation, but what kind of a totally new government we need to have. And so it was a time of debate. It was a time of arguing and disagreements and eventually compromises. We talked about the Great Compromise, the Virginia plan and the New Jersey plan, and the big state said we should get more votes because we have more people, and the small state said that's not fair. We should have equal votes, and how the Great Compromise was to have legislative branch have two parts: the House of Representatives, where the more people you have in your state, the more votes you get, and then the Senate, where every state gets an equal vote. So they agreed to that. Our country still has that today. If you're ever watching the news, you'll hear about the House of Representatives and the Senate. Our country still has that two-part legislative branch of government. So some of the decisions they made back then still affect our country today. It's been working for nearly 300 years, 250 years. So it was important decisions that they were making for our country. They had to compromise about the issue of slavery. The southern states wanted to count all of their slaves in their population, and they didn't agree to that. They said you can only count 3 out of every 5 slaves in your population. That was called the 3/5 compromise. But they compromised, and finally they found out that everything they thought that everything was fair and made sense. And so we're to today's lesson, page 57 in your social studies book, and we're going to find out what this new plan of government is called, and if it's going to pass, and if it becomes the law of our land. So let's begin on page 57, reading the United States Constitution. The convention drew to a close in late September. By then, many delegates had already gone home. Only 39 of the original 55 delegates actually signed the final document. The final document achieved the main goal of the convention. It created a strong but limited government. The document set up a federal system that separated governing power into 3 branches of government. The federal government and the state governments were now set up in much the same way. Now, here are Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, Anti-Federalist and Federalists. We're going to talk more about them later and what an Anti-Federalist is and a Federalist. That ends our lesson. Then we're going to go back and do some pretty cool stuff with Anti-Federalist and Federalist. But let's read on now. Did I skip a page? I did skip a page. Let me go back. Sorry, guys. There we go. I wondered what happened. Go to page 58 in your book. Somehow I skipped over page 58. Let me make sure I didn't skip any more. That's where we were. Crazy Mr. Helton. All right, so let's look at this page right here. There's some important things on these pages right here. Checks and balances. What in the world does that mean? One of the many important features of the new government was the system of checks and balances. It helped strengthen the separation of power between the 3 branches of government. Checks and balances provided a way to keep any one branch of government from having greater power than the others. Each branch had the power to check or stop the actions of the other branches. In this way, the power among the branches stayed balanced. Now, this is so interesting because this is big news right now in our country. This separation of powers, the president and the executive branch. He can't be like a king and have all the power because the other 2 branches of government has power to check him and make sure he doesn't abuse his power. The legislative branch can't have all the power. These other two branches check them. So what's happening in our country right now is big news. If you think about the three branches in our country today, you have the legislative branch, that's Congress, that's Senate, that's the House of Representatives. You hear people's names all over the news, like the Speaker of the House of Representatives. You've heard she talks all the time. Her name is Nancy Pelosi. She's the Speaker. She's kind of in charge of the House of Representatives. You have senators there's two from every state, and you have these senators, and they're the ones that have the each state gets an equal vote. Now, you hear about those names, and of course you hear about the president. He's part of the executive branch, President Trump. And then you have Vice President Mike Pence, and then you have their cabinet members. They choose people to help them with all the jobs of dealing with foreign countries. That person's called the Secretary of State. And they have people that are in charge of helping with the money, like the Secretary of the Treasury and things like that. So they have people with doing the big jobs of the country that help them. That's their cabinet members. And then you have the judicial branch, which is the Supreme Court. And what happened recently in our country a couple of weeks ago, there was one of the justices, they're not called judges, but one of the justices on the Supreme Court died. Ruth Ginsburg was her name. Now, one of the jobs of the president is to appoint somebody to replace her. So President Trump has picked another lady who is highly respected, and he picked her to be one of the new 9 Supreme Court justices. It's funny because some people are saying President Trump shouldn't do that because it's so close to election. He should wait and see if he's elected before he should appoint them to the Supreme Court, that lady to the Supreme Court. And he's saying, no, I'm the president right now. I'm still in office. I need to do my job. But his power is checked because whoever he presents to be this new judge, I can't remember her name off the top of my head. He can't just make her a new Supreme Court justice. Whoever he picks has to go before the legislative branch and be approved. And so this lady who he's picking, starting today, and today is when I'm recording this lesson, is Monday, October the 12th. So she's actually going before the House of Representatives, I think, today. And they're going to ask her all kinds of tough questions. And those people who don't think President Trump should pick her yet, they're probably going to try to not let her be the next Supreme Court justice. And then there'll be a battle in the Senate and the House of Representatives, just like it was back then when they were fighting over this and that, when they were making the Constitution. Boy, they still fight all the time today. And so we'll be finding out this week, probably, or next week, whether or not she gets to be one of the new members of the judicial branch of government. He picked her, the president picked her, but they have to approve her. That's called checks and balances. They get to approve or disapprove of who he picks. Now, this group of the legislative branch, you see, their job is to make laws. And once they make a law, President Trump can say, I agree with that law. Let's make it a law. But even if they both agree, it still has to go to the judicial branch, and they have to say, yeah, that's a good law. It follows our Constitution, or no, that's unconstitutional. You can't make that a law. So these branches have to work together, and they have to do it that way. They have to check and balance each other. That's the way it was set up, so that not any one person or not any one branch would have too much power. They all have important jobs to do. They need to work together better than they do nowadays, for sure. If you hear all the fighting, all you do is turn on the news. It's always arguing, isn't it? These branches arguing with one another. It's sad because we have such a great country and they need to work together better. But the way it was set up was very, very smart. That there are 3 branches of government and they all have to work together to get anything done. So that's what checks and balances are. They balance each other's power out. Now, let's move on to the next page because we could talk forever about that. And we'll need to go back and review the branches of government and make sure you understand their jobs. We'll do that later, but we need to finish this lesson first. So a flexible document. The Finnish Constitution was shorter than most state constitutions because the delegates did not want it to have too many details. They wanted the rules to be flexible. This allowed the Constitution to change as the country's needs changed. So they made a good plan for government, but they made a way for it to be changed. We'll read about that. Ratifying the Constitution. Ratifying means agreeing to or accepting the Constitution, approving the Constitution. So the next step in creating the new government was getting the states to ratify or to approve the Constitution. Once 9 states approved the document, it would become the law. The delegates went home and began trying to gather support. In every state, people read copies of the Constitution. They gathered in homes, town squares, taverns, and other meeting places to talk about it. The Constitution shocked many people. They thought it was too much of a change. Remember, they just thought they were going in to update the Articles of Confederation, and here they come out with this new plan. In some states, there were great debates. Americans split into 2 groups, the Federalists, who supported the Constitution. Do you remember what a federal plan of government was? We read it. It's where the federal government, the national government, has more power than the states. Those people who thought we should have a strong government, they were called Federalists. But remember, some states thought they should be more powerful than the federal government. And those people who thought the state should have more power, they were called Anti-Federalist. That means they were not for a federal government. They believed it took too much power away from the states. Many citizens also believed the Constitution did not respect some important rights. Have you ever heard the preamble of the Constitution? You're going to hear it a lot of times. I know you've heard it in the song we listen to. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. That's the first paragraph of the Constitution. It starts with those famous words, we the people. And the preamble is what it's called. It's the first paragraph. It says, here is why we think we need to make this Constitution. And tomorrow we're going to talk about all these different parts. Tomorrow I'm going to teach you a little dance to the preamble so that you can dance along with the song. And we'll have a good time doing that. And we'll talk more about the preamble tomorrow. So let's just skip over here to this page. Now, you had Anti-Federalist and Federalist. Remember, Anti-Federalists thought that the states should have more power than they did under the Constitution. They thought they were giving the government too much power, and that big, strong government that's now created would be like King George and take away people's rights. Thomas Jefferson was one of those people, believe it or not. James Madison, he's called the father of the Constitution. It was his idea it was the Virginia plan. He thought we need a strong government, stronger than the states, for our country to work right. So he was a Federalist. If you'd like to read these on page 60 and 61 to find out more information about these men, it's in your book. They're on page 60 and 61. So do you think the states are going to agree to the Constitution? Do you think it's going to become the law of the land? Or do you think the argument is just too strong between the Anti-Federalist and the Federalist? Well, I'll leave you hanging one last time this week, and then we'll come back together tomorrow and we'll find out if the Constitution became our country's law or not. See you then.